Just a quick heads up, everybody. The thoughts and opinions in this episode are all mine and may not necessarily reflect those of our sponsors. So if you find yourself raising an eyebrow, blame me, not them. This is all my fault. All right, let's go. Home sellers, every week we talk to a bunch of adult children who are finding themselves in charge of selling their parents' home. So this week, I'm talking to you. This very same thing happened to my mom. So not only do we have a lot of experience with these situations, I have been where you are on the other side of this. So I'll bring you both perspectives today. So whether it's because your parents are moving, maybe they're getting into assisted living, maybe they're downsizing, or maybe they're moving in with one of you, or possibly mom or dad is alone and they don't want to handle the large home by themselves anymore. Or like in a lot of cases, you inherited the house and now possibly you and your siblings are trying to navigate this process. But in all cases, there's a lot of stress. There's fear of the unknown. There's a strong desire not to screw this up. Believe me, we get it. This process is not only logistical and practical, it is emotional. So stick around because today we're going to break down exactly how to navigate it successfully. And I promise I will give you lots of practical, actionable advice so you can get through this and avoid any additional scars. Hi, and welcome to Talking Realty, the go-to podcast for home sellers looking to make more money, save time, and avoid headaches. Whether you're selling a flip, a new build, an income property, or the place you call home, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Glen, 20-year realtor and founder of the Ohio Property Group. Selling a home can be a complicated and costly process. It leaves sellers feeling uncertain and many times overwhelmed. At the Ohio Property Group, we empower sellers to successfully reach the closing table while keeping a lot more money in their pockets. To learn more, head over to talkingrealty.com to pick up our monthly newsletter or any of our free home seller tools, and there's a bunch of them. If you haven't already, please give this show a rating so we can spread the word. Now, let's get to it. Hello, home sellers. As you know, I like to start with a story, and for this episode, at first I was like, man, this is going to be really easy because we have so many stories about people who are trying to sell their home for their family, whether it's mom or dad or a family member of some other sort. But then it became hard because there are so many stories. So I'll just tell you what happened several years ago when my sisters and I found ourselves in this exact same situation. What you don't know is that my mom was stubborn. She was sweet. She was wonderful, but when she set her mind to anything, there was absolutely no point in trying to persuade her to go in another direction. And believe it or not, probably not too shocking, as she got older, it got worse. My parents divorced in the 70s. I was still in grade school. And I know it's hard for you to believe that young-looking Glen here was in grade school in the 70s, but it's true. It's a verifiable fact. And anyway, in a very short period, my mother went from being a 25-year full-time stay-at-home mom to the sole breadwinner with 4 of us at home. And she proved to everybody, and mostly to herself, that she didn't need anybody to make it in this world. My mother was a writer for many years, and so she had her desk and her typewriter, piles of paper, but firmly stuck to the wall right above her typewriter was an old sign with a quote from Irina Dunn, and it said, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." She was fiercely independent. But as she approached her 80s, it became pretty clear to everyone except her that she probably shouldn't be living alone or driving, but that's another story. Anyway, it wasn't until a couple of years after that she finally left her beloved little house, her sanctuary. It was hard. It was hard for her to leave. It was very hard for us to see her leave. And it was hard for us to witness the end of, frankly, about a 45-year run of fierce independence. But it was time. Mom needed to go to somewhere where she could have some extra help. And as the family realtor, naturally, I was consulted. And even though I'm not licensed in Illinois, I did offer my advice to my sisters and we moved ahead with the process. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you're in a situation where you're left to clear out the family home and watch it go to another owner, I see you. I see you and I get you. And whether it's painful or just a pain in the butt, we're here. We're here to guide you through that process. And as I mentioned in the opening, we do a fair number of these. I'll bet a week doesn't go by that we don't get a couple of these listings. And they all kind of start out the same. One family member is either legally or unofficially designated the go-to, and they come to us and just kind of say, how does this work? Because, they want to be good stewards of the family assets, particularly if mom or dad is depending on that proceeds from that sale to launch the next chapter of their life. Or if they're gone, then, they need to be responsible as the executor. So anyway, I'm going to give you lots and lots of advice on how to prep, how to market, how to show, how to negotiate, and how to close the sale so you can focus on that next chapter, whatever it is. And to start, there are two scenarios that lead to this call, but both of these origins end up in the same place, which is you selling the house. Let's look at both situations of how you found yourself in charge of selling the family home. And the first scenario I want to look at is the parents are still alive, or one or the other, and they're just moving. The first thing you need to tackle is their level of involvement. Are they comfortable making decisions? Do they have the capacity to make those decisions? Or is this just in one way or another too much for them? Somebody needs to kind of quarterback this process. And as the listing agent, I can certainly lend a hand, but there's only so much I can do. Somebody at the family level needs to take charge. And we'll talk a little bit more about what to do when there's a committee here in a minute. But once we check the box of how involved are mom or dad going to be, then we can move forward. So some parents, I will tell you, have absolutely no desire. Maybe they're perfectly capable of being involved. They just don't want anything to do with it. Maybe it's too hard for them. Maybe I've had some cases where the parents are off in an RV, or the parents are off in their new place down in Florida or Arizona, and they don't want anything to do with it. So if that's the situation, you know your parents better than I do. So what I don't want is for you to make some decisions that are quasi-permanent and have that blow back on you later. But again, I'm not in your moccasins, so you're going to have to figure that part out. If they want to be involved, maybe they're dragging their feet pretty bad, which was the case with my mom. She knew she couldn't live there anymore, but she didn't want to let it go. I guess she always had that hope that at some point she would return to that home, like when she healed up from a fall, or when she got her blood sugar under control, or whatever the issue was that was causing her to have one of us around and not allow her to be able to live completely independently as she so much desired. We tried getting her the LifeLock or something similar to that, and that was just not good. That didn't work very well. I mean, she'd leave it everywhere. I think she felt that that was also an intrusion on her independence. But at the end of the day, she finally saw the light that she literally had no choice. So in that case, though, she wasn't ready to let go. So if mom or dad is fully involved, then they're legally in charge, which they are until they aren't. And just let me break that down for you really quickly. You, as a well-meaning child of the parents, you cannot legally sign any of these papers. You have to have the legal capacity as an executor, power of attorney, something like that. And we'll break those two down here shortly, but you need to be one or the other. Otherwise, the parents still have to sign the paperwork. Now, you can do all the legwork and you can do most of the lifting. You can do most of the interaction with us, with the realtor, with the buyer, but the parents still have to sign. If they are legally in charge and they're unwilling to do this, you're going to have a severe uphill battle on your hands. So my advice is to probably just cool your heels and let them come to it on their own. I'm reading a pretty good book right now. I'll reference it in the show notes. It's called The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins, Robbins. You should not have any trouble finding it. This thing is blowing up everywhere. But it kind of says what I just said, is that you're not going to legally or any other way force your parents into this process. So I wouldn't. It's not worth it. Sit on the real estate. Now, if there's a dire situation where they're up against the wall and they have to sell because maybe they got a reverse mortgage or maybe they've got bills that necessitate the selling of the family home, then that's a different story. But I would say in general, if it's okay to hang on to it and that's what they really want, it's probably the right thing to do. So I'll leave you with that decision. But the most common roadblocks for a parent who needs to sell but doesn't want to is just that fear. It's resistance, it's stress, It's attachment. I mean, it's not the same as you or I moving to another house, because we know that's not the last chapter. When a parent sells what they believe is their last home, or gives up possession of it, they kind of know that this is the swan song. And it's, some adapt better than others. My mother kicking and screaming, some are, you know, screaming yeehaw and riding off into the sunset. So it's going to be all over the place. But once you get down to the point where you think they're there, but you still haven't sorted out who's actually going to take the lead, one of the things you can do is give, for example, you could say, Mom, do you want to be involved in the decision making, or would you prefer that I handle the details and check in with you when necessary? So that's a way for maybe to feel more like you're helping her, but she's still in charge, versus just, out of the way, I'm going to take over. Some parents don't really respond too well to that. Try to make it as positive as possible, especially if you really do need to sell and you may be more in touch with that situation than they are. We need to sell the house is a little strong. So you might try something like, let's find the best way to make sure you're in a place that makes life easier and more enjoyable for you. If you can paint a picture of not we're leaving the house, but we're heading somewhere better, that's can oftentimes grease it up just enough to get the process moving. But the reality is, unless your parents have assigned you the power of attorney, they still need to sign the listing agreement. They still need to sign the purchase contract, the property disclosures, and all of the closing documents like the deed. So either get a power of attorney or they need to be on board. So if they are, great, you can move forward. If not, you're going to need a plan for that situation, especially if it's dire. So at that point, you might want to contact some sort of social worker. Hospitals, assisted living places often have contacts for these types of situations, or of course, legal experts who can help you navigate these things. So origin number 2, if origin 1 is parents are still living, one or the other or both, origin 2 is an estate. That's where the parents are no longer living, and now we've got a probate situation. So you're going to be looking for documents like wills and trusts and any other legal instructions. And hopefully there's a family attorney that knows all this stuff, or a drawer where everybody knows where that stuff is kept. But assuming you've kind of figured that part out, you're going to be looking for who is the executor. If there is no executor named and you've got multiple heirs, it gets a little trickier. You need to talk to an attorney about that. But I can tell you from our perspective, if a family comes to us, one of the very first questions we ask in this situation is who's in charge? And we'll ask, legally speaking, is anyone the executor? If we get a yes, then we identify that person. And that doesn't even have to be the person that's the go-between with us. They just need to be the person that signs the documents. We can still have another person in charge of kind of the nuts and bolts or gymnastics of the selling of the property, the prep, the showing, all that stuff. It could be the same person, doesn't have to be. What I need to know from my end is who is that legal decision maker. And if it's a lot of people, then it's a lot of people. So we've had situations where I've had to send out documents and 5 or 6 different people had to review it and sign it. Okay, we can do that. As long as the siblings generally agree, I'm happy to play host. But if the siblings are disagreeing over a price, or maybe just who's going to list it, are you going to go for sale by owner? Are you going to get a realtor? You're going to fix it up? You're going to leave it as is? There may be some sentimental issues. Maybe somebody's ticked off because they weren't put in charge. Those are things that you have to sort out. And as painful as it is, you can't move forward until we've got everybody kind of singing from the same hymnal, as it were. There could also be unresolved financial or legal issues like debts or liens, or maybe a reverse mortgage. You can't sell it without clearing out that process. And then finally, there's the emotional resistance. So some family members just need more time, or maybe they need more or less control over the process. I know in my situation, I had no need for control. Fortunately, in this case, they were able to come together and we had some legal guidance from Mom. So that helped. She kind of tapped who was going to be in charge of what, and that made a big difference. But regardless, even if there is clarity from a legal standpoint, doesn't make it necessarily easier for the family to get along and do what needs to be done. You need to be sensitive to that, because you're going to be related to these people, presumably for the rest of your life. So you don't want this one moment in time That's a big moment. And it's probably, like all home sales, it's not even the biggest stressor of the moment. The biggest stressor is probably the death of the parent, or the moving of the parent in with a sibling, or the moving of a parent into assisted living. That's probably the larger stressor. But yet all the focus goes on this one because we can't do anything about the other one. So then we take all that angst, all those feelings, and we drive them into this. And that can be very, very difficult. So as you're moving through this, keep in mind that the practical answer, while practically correct, may not necessarily be the best answer for your family and your situation. So you just kind of need to gauge that and try to bring everybody along. If there are disagreements, which it's not uncommon at all, and the disagreement may be over anything. It could be over something as small as a painting that's hanging up, or it could be as large as I want the house. I want to move in. So those have to be sorted out. And if you can focus, if mom and dad are still with us, then that's really the focus, is what's best for them. And how do we work together to make it as smooth as possible? If there's conflict and it's really bad, consider hiring a mediator or a neutral third party. There are people out there. Talk to local attorneys that can probably help you with that can really help you with this. It could be the real estate attorney. It could be an estate specialist, but there are ways, if it's truly a nuclear situation, where you can get some help in sorting through these issues. But either way, as the realtor, I only need the signature of the executor. But if all the heirs have to sign, it's not ideal, but it can be done. Sometimes we're dealing with time-sensitive things. Let's fast forward. We got the house under contract. We're dealing with an inspection, repair, remedy situation where we've only got maybe 48 hours to decide how to respond. If I've got to get 7 people to align, and that's not easy to do, we may lose the entire deal if we don't get it done. So something to think about. If I just have one person to deal with, much, much smoother for the home sale process. But even if all the heirs are legally involved and still legally have to sign, it could even be a situation where you get together and somebody appoints someone. Everybody appoints and agrees that so-and-so is going to handle all this back and forth. At least we can get things moving and keep them moving. We use email chains for communicating when we have multiple errors. We do conference calls, we do Zoom sessions, anything we need to do to make sure everybody is fully understanding of what's happening. And then I take a lot of private calls from one or the other heir with my appointee, with my person that's my contact. So maybe one particular heir has some very specific questions. So the 3 of us will hop on a call or a Zoom and we'll get those ironed out. When there's a will, there's a way. Or in this case, when there's no will, there's still a way. Hey, real quick, as most of you know, we don't run paid ads for our real estate company or this podcast. We rely on good old-fashioned people talking to people, word of mouth. So if you find any of this content useful, would you mind taking a few seconds and just give us a quick rating or a thumbs up if you're on YouTube? Hopefully that little act will put this podcast on someone's radar, someone who really needs it. I'd consider it a personal favor. Let's spread the word to other home sellers, okay? Back to your regularly scheduled podcast. Moving on to the legal and financial side. For probate considerations, if that applies, if the home was in a trust, the process is usually a lot smoother. If not, then probate may be required before the home can be sold. So you want to check with the estate attorney who can advise you here on a case-by-case situation. Another legal term, or a couple of them that get thrown around, is the power of attorney, and then there's the executor. So just to kind of break that down real quick, the power of attorney is a document that allows someone else besides the parent to make financial decisions while the parent is still alive. And depending on your situation, that could be a very appropriate thing to do. If they want you to handle everything, or for whatever reason they're not in a position to handle everything themselves, then a power of attorney makes a lot of sense. So you'll contact someone and get that set up. If we're dealing with a will or probate situation after the parent's passing, then we're dealing with an executor or someone who's in charge of the estate. And briefly, from a financial consideration, if the home has increased significantly in value, capital gains are probably in play. Again, you want to talk to an attorney or an accountant about that sort of thing. Another note to keep in mind is that if the parent was in long-term care paid for by Medicare, then Medicare does have an estate recovery process. So if that was the case here, you may want to contact someone, not necessarily at Medicare, but someone who's an expert on how this whole process works to see if there's anything in the will that maybe shelters that or at least guides you on how to proceed. All right, enough of that boring stuff. Next up, we need to get the home ready to sell. Once we've kind of identified who's going to be quarterbacking this process, we can start to move forward. If you have the time, if you have the money and the resources, I would get a pre-inspection. This is simply to help you avoid surprises. And the problems that exist with the home are going to surface at some point. The sooner you know about them, the better. And I get that there's this whole argument that realtors love to spin is that, well, if you don't know about it, then obviously it's not going to hurt you because you don't have to disclose it. While that is true, if you don't know about a problem, naturally, you can't disclose it. But that doesn't mean it's not going to hurt you. Knowing about a problem and disclosing it is actually the right thing to do, both karmically and practically speaking. Because if you get the house on the market and the buyer discovers a problem you didn't know about, they're probably not going to buy, or they're going to buy at a much lower price. And by the way, when that buyer tanks, if they do, you now know about the problem. Once again, you're back behind the 8 ball. If you do it before you ever put the house on the market, you can, at a minimum, disclose it so no one can use it against you, or you can get it fixed. And I will tell you, getting things fixed before you put the house on the market is far cheaper, far less stressful than getting things fixed while you're under contract or while the clock is ticking, so to speak. Meaning you're under contract and we've got a certain number of days to wrap this up. When you're under contract, you don't have time to find the best contractor who's available, but maybe not available today. You have to go with either whoever's available right now, probably not the best contractor, or you have to pay super premium prices to get it done quickly. All bad. Whereas if you do it when the clock is not ticking, i.e. before you put the house on the market, you've got a chance to get quotes, you've got a chance to maybe get competing bids, but suffice it to say, whether it's a chimney or whether it's a basement issue, a roof issue, a furnace issue, they're all less expensive to deal with, less painful to deal with when you do it before you put the house on the market. If there is a roof problem or any of these other things I mentioned, it will come out probably during the contract, and that's going to hurt you. So my best advice is that 99.9 times out of 100, it is far better to deal with them ahead of time. Yes, it is possible you could sail through as an as is with no knowledge of anything that's wrong, and maybe the buyer also doesn't bother to look, but those situations are very much the exception, maybe even extinct at this point. If you got time, you got the resources, pay a few $100s, get a full-blown pre-inspection, pre-sale inspection from a home inspector. Then even if you're not going to fix anything, it allows you to take that information and go get quotes for it, which are also free. Go get quotes on the major fixes. You can handle anything critical if you want, but if you don't feel like replacing the roof or the HVA, or if you've got structural problems, then at least you know how much they're going to cost. So if you're negotiating with someone who says, oh, that's a $30,000 problem, you know for a fact that it's not a $30,000 problem because you have multiple quotes saying otherwise. That gives you leverage during the negotiations. If, on the other hand, you know it is a, say, $10,000 problem and someone comes along and wants a $5,000 discount because of this issue, maybe they can fix it themselves. Now you know that's a good deal. So knowledge is power, as they say. But at a minimum, please declutter, deep clean, and do your best to lightly stage it. I did a whole episode on this. If time and money are tight, go back to episode 35 of this podcast where I talk in depth about selling the home as is. Totally doable. But at a minimum, I want you to focus on depersonalization and decluttering. These are the biggest levers you can pull in terms of increasing your value and lowering some of your headaches, besides maybe the pre-inspection. So if you're going to do a pre-inspection, disclosing that information to potential buyers is going to help you keep that deal together when you do get one, because you're being fully transparent. You're offering up everything they could possibly need to know, which is going to increase the pool of buyers that would consider your home. Truth number 6, more buyers equals more money for you. Buyers hate surprises. So the fewer of those they perceive in this property, the better. And additionally, buyers will pay for potential. If they know roughly what it's going to cost to fix whatever's wrong, and they can see what the house is going to be worth after it's all fixed, now you're dealing with people who can see the potential and will pay for some of that potential. But let's say you've got some roadblocks between here and there. And we'll kind of run through those. So there are a handful of emotional challenges, and I'd like to give you some tools that we've seen be very effective over the years when dealing with, say, a reluctant parent. One of my favorite things to say to them is, look, I know this is hard, so go ahead and acknowledge how they're feeling. It's not just the house. It was your home. But we want to make sure you're in a place where you can enjoy life without the stress. So let's find a way to do this together. So you give them back some of their agency, and assuming they want to be involved, or maybe they said they don't want to be involved, but then all of a sudden that changes when decisions have to be made. This is a great approach for them. Show some empathy, help them understand that you certainly understand what they're going through and that you have no intention of railroading them. For siblings, if you've got a committee, one of my favorite things to say to the siblings is, look, we may not agree on every detail, but we all want the best outcome. So how do we make this fair for everyone? Go ahead and open it up and listen. And whether or not you agree with whatever they say, or if you've got, divergent opinions, at some point you'll have to make the call, the tough call, but at least they know you've heard them. That can go a long way towards smoothing things over, because let's face it, once this house is done, that is out of the way. But those relationships with your siblings hopefully shouldn't suffer permanent damage over something like this. If you're completely overwhelmed, you can't get to the bottom of these situations with mom or with the dad or with the kids, meaning your other siblings, then you may want to consider hiring someone. There are people out there who, usually attorneys or mediators, that specialize in these types of situations. And I get that that's extreme, but I've seen some very extreme situations. And as realtors, I can do some of this, and that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, we have a pretty hard and fast rule that we don't get involved in domestic situations like that. So when we've got people who disagree, and I need them all to agree, I'll do my best to sprinkle some pixie dust on it and make it work. But if they're not going to, I'll have to recommend more extreme measures, such as hiring a mediator or going back to the attorney and seeing what the rules say, so that we know who can make that final decision. And then at some point, they're just going to have to do it. If you've got a committee of willing people and maybe somebody's feeling left out, that could also cause some tension. So what I like to do is share the load. If you've got multiple siblings, which, count yourself fortunate if you do, I know it comes at a cost, but my wife, for example, is an only child, and we dealt with this on her side of the family. She was it. Now, she didn't have to deal with any other people pulling at her, but she had to do it all by herself. She had to make all these tough decisions. And I was there to help her and support her, but she really felt kind of isolated. So in some ways, I know it can be a hassle, but count yourself lucky if you've got some siblings to argue with during this time. But anyhow, if one or more of them is feeling left out, why not kind of sit back and think, what are these folks good at? If anything, maybe take one person and have them handle the legal. Maybe they're an attorney or they've done some of this work before. Have them take the point. You'd still make the decisions, but have them maybe take the point on information gathering and boiling down the overwhelming amount of information. You could have another one take over the cleaning and the staging and the decluttering. All of this could help you not feel so overwhelmed and help them feel included. Could keep the peace long term. It also gives your siblings kind of a hand in the solution and a perspective of your job. So if they're in charge of something and they're getting pushback from other siblings, well, perhaps they'll all start to see that it's no picnic being in charge of any aspect of this. So could soften things for you down the road, maybe make them a little bit more agreeable if they experience that feeling firsthand. This episode of Talking Realty is brought to you by our friends over at Associates Title. Man, I love these folks. This team is shaking things up by focusing on what truly matters, putting the customer first. Whether you're buying, selling, investing, for sale by owner, or working with a realtor, they've got your back with incredible cost savings and the latest tech to streamline the entire process. Their secure online portal keeps everybody in the loop. Buyers, sellers, lenders, agents, everybody, all while keeping your data safe, muy importante, and communication crystal clear. If you're getting ready to make a move, don't underestimate the importance of having a great title company in your corner. Check them out today at associatestitleinc.com or call my friend Ryan Phillips at 614-419-2418. Check the show notes for those links. Do not leave your title company choice to chance, and definitely don't let the buyer or their agent make that choice for you. All right, back to the podcast. So once we've figured out who's legally in charge, who can make the decisions, and we've got the property ready to market, we need to go out and figure out how we're going to tell the world that this house is for sale. And there's a number of ways to do that. The easy sort of quick and dirty version is to run down to Lowe's or Home Depot and pick up a for sale by owner sign, write your phone number on it, and plant it in the yard and wait for the phone to ring. That is one way to do it. Now, we have a phrase here, never ask a hungry barber if you need a haircut. Well, I am not a hungry barber. However, I am a realtor, and I'm telling you that there is a reason why people hire realtors. So if you go for sale by owner versus hiring a realtor, you're going to need an attorney to help with the paperwork and any legal issues that will most certainly pop up. That is going to cost you, and it's probably going to be a local attorney. You need to ask yourself, how available are they when you need them? So for example, if you get a buyer on the line, or maybe you've got multiple offers, is the attorney going to be responsive enough to accommodate your buyers and their timelines? Because sometimes buyers can get pretty pushy. They want answers in hours, not days. And sometimes getting an attorney to review everything and give you a legal opinion can take a little bit of time. So you'll want to ask those questions. Also, how experienced is that attorney when it comes to negotiating residential real estate deals? So it's more than just putting it on paper. Certainly lots and lots of attorneys can take the deal that you strike and get it into a legal document. They're very good at that. But when it comes to the nuances of maximizing your terms, or maybe looking for hidden costs in the deal, that might not necessarily be in their wheelhouse. So kind of keep that in mind and maybe see if they've done other deals recently. And can that attorney help you through any inspection issues or appraisal issues, or, some of the other fun things that pop up between contract and closing? So a realtor would be more experienced than most attorneys, not all, but most attorneys. If you do choose to go for sale by owner, another thing you need to keep in mind is that a for sale by owner is very, very difficult to market to the wider market. As a for sale by owner, you cannot access the multiple listing service. And that is where 99.9% of all public websites that carry real estate listings get their information. It's called syndication, and it goes to hundreds of local websites, national websites, regional websites like Realtor.com and Zillow and Trulia and Homes.com. They all get their information from all the various MLSs across the country. So as a for sale by owner, you won't have access to that. And truth number 6, more buyers equals more money. So the reverse is also true. If very few buyers know about your property because they didn't see your sign, or they didn't, even if you posted it on the web, what are the odds that it's going to show up in that buyer's search? Most buyers head to places like Realtor.com or Zillow.com or Homes.com, and they set up alerts. They also go to local realtors and say, hey, send me all the new listings. You're not going to be on any of those broadcasts. So you're cutting yourself off from the potential pool of buyers. And just like an auction, if few people know about the auction and very few people show up, it's not going to be a great auction versus a very well publicized auction that's going to bring in a huge crowd. That's going to get you maximum value for all the items in that auction. Same deal here. So let's say you've decided to consider hiring a realtor. Before we get too far down that path, let me explain there are 2 types of realtors out there. One is what we call a traditional realtor. That's the person that comes over, they look at your house, they sign you to a 6-month agreement, and then sometime between now and closing, you strike a deal and they help you get there. And at closing, they collect about 6% of the value of that deal. If there's a second agent involved, one who's working for the buyer, that agent will get some or half or roughly half of that 6%. That's traditional. And they're all going to work pretty much out of the same playbook. There'll be some little nuances here, which they will work to convince you are massive differences. But at the end of the day, they're going to do about the same thing. And they're going to charge you 6% of what your home is worth, which is peculiar. You've probably heard me say this before, but if I've got a $200,000 house, 6% is $12,000. If I've got a $1 million house, 6% of that is $60,000. So what is the $60,000 fee going to get me that the $12,000 fee isn't going to get me? The answer is nothing. There's no difference. You're going to pay this wildly different fee and you're going to get basically the same service. Food for thought. The other type of agent, if you're not going to go traditional, is a flat fee agent. And in case you haven't figured this out yet, that is the type of practice we have. We do flat fee for the reason I just told you, is that we charge everybody the same amount regardless of the price of the home. We charge them based on the services they choose. So if they want very little service, in other words, they just want to be in the MLS and get marketing, great, we do that. It's $300 and no one can tell the difference. When you show up on Realtor.com or on Zillow or Homes or any of those other places, you're going to be listed exactly like every other listing out there. So buyers and agents can't tell the difference. That's one major advantage, that we're going to save you a bunch of money. Flat fee agents just charge a lot less. Now, there are varying degrees of flat fee agents out there. We offer a full menu of services up to full service, but many of them don't. Many of the flat fee agents out there only offer that MLS only service. They just take your money, they put you in the MLS, and then they vanish. So we do things a little bit differently. So you'll want to check that out. Just head to talkingrealty.com. You can see all of our options. But if you want to maximize returns for your parents, flat fee is certainly more economical if you don't mind doing some of the legwork. But traditional will be very little touch. It's just going to be at a really high cost. Another thing to keep in mind is that in Ohio, we do literally hundreds and hundreds of deals every year. The traditional agent, on the other hand, is going to do, according to the National Association of Realtors, the average realtor does between 2 and 4 deals a year. That's one every 3 to 6 months. Well, if you did something every 3 to 6 months, you're probably not very good at it. And something as complicated as a real estate deal should require a little bit more practice, we'll say. But regardless, whether you hire someone on the traditional level or you look for a solid flat fee option, you should be aware that there are these options out there. In the end, you need to be comfortable with who you choose. You need to be comfortable with that broker. If you're just going to ignore everything the broker tells you because you don't have a good feeling about them, you shouldn't have hired them. So I tell people all the time, if I don't care how attractive my price is to you, if you don't trust me and have a good feeling about working with me, you should pay somebody a lot more money because that's valuable. So just keep that in mind. In the end, you are paying for marketing, web exposure, and advice. So choose wisely whether you want just the marketing and web exposure or you want the full Monty and have that person on board for you. All right. Well, that's enough about that. Hey, real quick, most home sellers dread the inspection and appraisal process. Our online course, Living to Listing, teaches you how to turn any property into the perfect listing all by yourself. So you sail through inspections, sail through appraisals, and sell faster and for more dinero. In Living to Listing, you get dozens of checklists, tools, and walkthrough videos for every step of the way. And I promise you, if this course doesn't meet your high standards, just let me know. Not only am I going to give you a complete refund, I'm also going to let you keep the course. That's how confident I am that this course will make you money, save you time, and help you avoid a ton of headaches. You literally have nothing to lose. So check out the course today at livingtolisting.com. That's livingtolisting.com. Let me know what you think. So once the house is prepped, once you've got the realtor on board, if that's your route, somebody's got to take some pictures. And once you get it ready to go, get it looking as good as you can, I have a checklist, which I will link to in the show notes that you can go download. It is free. Enjoy. That talks you through how to take good photos if you're going to do it yourself. If you're going to hire someone who specializes in real estate photography, that's fine. It's going to cost you several $100s, but the product is usually very good. 20 to maybe 30 pictures should do, unless you've got just a crazy, Michael Jordan $12 million mansion. You might need a few more photos. But keep in mind, the photos are there just to give prospective buyers enough information to get them off the couch and set up a showing. You're not going to sell the house with the photos, so don't try. Don't get too crazy. Oh my gosh, the second hallway picture should have been 14th instead of 13th. Don't do that to yourself. It doesn't matter. When it comes to writing the property description, we call it the love story. I want you to describe the property, but don't just give me a list of features. I can't stand it. And most of them look like this. In fact, most of the property descriptions you read that start with welcome to such and such, such and such, and then they rattle off, it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, colonial, blah, blah, blah. They're telling you everything that you could get from the property data. In fact, most buyers search for those types of things. They're only searching for 3 bedrooms. So if it popped up, it's a 3 bedroom. You don't need to tell them that again. What I prefer is for you to paint a picture of why they should love living there, why they should consider buying this house. Maybe it's the potential of the house. Maybe it's the neighborhood. Maybe it's a fantastic neighborhood. Maybe there are 5 amazing ice cream shops or pizza shops within a few hundred steps. That would appeal to me. I'm not alone. I can't be alone on that, really. A few phrases that you can throw in, something like well-loved home, great potential, fantastic neighborhood, classic home, ready for a personal touch. Yes, you could read between the lines and say it needs updating, but mid-century modern is all the rage. If updating is minimal, go ahead and highlight it. Just like make it your own or modernize where it counts with room to customize, something like that. I'm looking for you to paint a picture for a potential buyer to help them see the vision of this house. Please don't tell me that it has a gas forced air furnace. Okay, that's contained in the listing, up in the data if they really care about it, but that's not a very sexy thing to tell buyers. Pricing. Oh boy, we could talk about this one forever if you want, but here goes. Let's say you've done the homework or you haven't done the homework. You've got a range of what you think it will sell for. Do me a favor, take the bottom end of that range and go slightly below it. Trust me on this, you will thank me later. Because if you overprice, it's going to sit there and very few buyers are going to want to look at it. If you underprice it, truly underprice it, it's going to generate a feeding frenzy, bidding war, and you're going to end up, anybody, right back at market value. Because truth number one, the market never lies, not ever. If you happen to miscue on the pricing, you get it out there, a couple of weeks go by, you're not really getting any showings, you're definitely not getting any offers, adjust. You can wait if you want. If that's the number you got to have, then that's the number you got to have. If time is not your enemy, go ahead, hold out for your price. But if you're looking to get rid of it now, start adjusting. We call it the 1-2 punch. Adjust midweek after the first full week, get halfway through the second week. If you haven't had any action, adjust the price. The more, the better. Then a day or so later, I want you to announce an open house if you're having them. If not, you can also set an offer deadline. I won't go down that rabbit hole. But every couple of weeks, I want you to adjust the price. There's this whole myth out there that too many price changes are bad. And it's just simply not true. Would it be better to price it correctly right out of the gate? Sure. But, none of us is Kreskin. That's why I tell you to go low, because you can't go wrong going low, but you can go wrong going high. So there you go. I've beat that dead horse long enough. Once you get it out there and you've got it priced, showings are next. I would love you to have an open house the first weekend it's open. Love you to go live on a Thursday or Friday, delay showings until after the first open house, hopefully around noon or 1 o'clock on a Saturday. Just run it for an hour, run it for 90 minutes, 2 hours at the very most. In fact, I'll get you an open house checklist if you want. I have one. I will link to it in the show notes. I'll give you all my sort of download on how to get ready for an open house. If you get a ton of traffic at that open house and you're getting buying signals, people asking questions about schools, about utilities, about offer terms, things like that, go ahead, set an offer deadline. Did a whole episode on that. So you can go back to that and check it out. Have your inspection report available to anyone who wants it. And the way I like to do this, don't waste a bunch of paper, just gather email address, get names and email addresses, phone numbers if you want. Just say, hey, if you want a copy of the inspection, jot down your name and your email address and phone number so that I can reach out to you and send it to you and you can check it out. So that way you're not wasting a bunch of paper and ink on an inspection report that's probably going to wind up in the garbage for everybody except 1 or 2 buyers. Assuming all is going well up to this point, you should be getting some offers. So encourage buyers to get their inspections out of the way before the offer. In fact, if you've done a pre-inspection, you can go as far as saying, listen, get all your stuff out of the way before you make the offer. I don't want to deal with anybody that's got a bunch of contingencies. Doesn't always work that way. If you've got enough buyers, you can pull that. But if you only got 1 or 2 buyers and they want to do inspections, you're going to have to let them. Another thing you're going to see in a feeding frenzy or a multiple offer situation, you're going to see these things called escalation clauses. They are very confusing to the uninitiated. If they bother you or your agent is not a fan, state very, very, very clearly in the MLS or somewhere that you will not be considering any offers that have escalation clauses. Just tell the agents up front. Doesn't mean you won't still get them, because people don't really read very well sometimes. But at least you've gone on record saying, hey, I'm not dealing with your escalation clauses, because they, like I said, can be very, very confusing. They're a great tool. I love them myself, but they're not for everybody. Another thing you can do is make sure any buyer who wants to submit an offer submits proof of their financing and or funds if they're paying cash. That is not out of bounds with the offer. Because a lot of offers will have a little thing in there that says proof of financing or proof of funds will be provided within 3 days of the acceptance of this contract. No bueno. You do not want to take a deal, take the house off the market, particularly in the middle of a bidding war, only to find out that, oops, my bad, I didn't get pre-approved. Ask for it at the time of the offer. Otherwise, I would be very hesitant to sign that offer. If you have an offer you love, you can tell them, hey, I love your offer. I want to take it, but not until you get me this. If it's cash, I want proof of funds. And that proof of funds need to be less than 30 days old. Don't be taking bank statements from 6 months ago, because chances are they've shown it to 500 agents. I want something recent. They can black out all the account information and all that stuff. I don't care about that. I just need to see their name, a current date, and an amount that is equal to or higher than what they're offering you for that house. So that's proof of funds. Proof of financing, that should be a letter from a bank or a mortgage company that says they are pre-approved and the amount must be stated and it must be equal to or higher than their offer. If there is no amount, tell them to get you a new letter. Don't fall for it. Maybe they've got hopes of getting it done after they get the house under contract, but that is not your problem. You need them to do it before. Okay, I'll stop beating you up on that. If something in the offer doesn't sit well, doesn't make sense to you, do not sign it. Do not move forward until you understand it. If you're really stuck, you can email me. Go to talkingrealty.com. My email address is right there. If I can't help you, I will at least point you in the right direction. You can also use our good friend ChatGPT. So it's another free tool for you. If you are in a committee situation, tell every single buyer that wants to make an offer that you need X number of days to respond. The worst thing you do is get a great offer. It has a 6-hour expiration and you're panicking trying to get everybody to agree. Just tell the buyer, look, this is a committee. This is an estate. I don't have the ability to just make that decision on my own. So you're going to need to give me a few days to get the troop together so I can get agreement. They'll understand. If you are for sale by owner and you get an offer from an agent, that agent is not working for you. Okay? That agent is working for the buyer. And anything you say can and will be used against you. So be very careful about what you share with an agent who is not your agent. Just assume they don't have your best interest. No matter how nice they are, no matter how helpful they are, their job, according to the state of Ohio, to keep their license, is to do everything in their power to get their buyer the best deal. And that means not getting you the best deal. If you have no plans to fix anything, disclose it all and tell everybody that you're selling the house as is. Go back to episode 35. I will bet you a nickel that you will get offers from people that can look very, very attractive, maybe well above list price, but they want you to take payments. And unless you want to be the bank and the landlord, don't do it. That is, unless you really know what you're doing. You're going to get rent to own offers. People do this all the time. They're going to give you a really, really, really great story. Man, they put so much effort into these stories. There's a death, usually of a soldier. There's some other major hardship, almost always involving children. There is all sorts of just sob story going on here. You're going to get a very long message asking if you would please, just please take, they make a ton of money, by the way. They all do. They all make $95,000, $100,000 a year, but they just can't swing it right now. Would you consider renting to them very short term? Folks, if you want to be a landlord, be a landlord. But if you want to sell the house, then sell the house and just politely decline. Just let them know, hey, I really wish we could help you, but we're just not in a position to do that right now. And leave it at that. You don't have to tell them anymore. You don't have to engage these offers beyond that. At the end of it, truth number 2, if it's not selling, it's overpriced. I wish I could be gentler with you, but if you've done all of this stuff, you've put the signs out, you've done all the MLS marketing and so forth, and you're doing Maybe you're getting showings, maybe you're not. If you're not getting offers that are good enough for you or no offers at all, I hate to tell you at this point, you're overpriced. And you can either wait and see what tomorrow's buyers bring, or you can start adjusting, like I mentioned earlier, and try to get today's buyers moving in the right direction. So to recap, I want you to get legal and financial advice early in the process. If you're selling the home for someone else, if you're selling a home for a parent, determine how involved they want to be or can be. If there are multiple heirs, assign roles, set clear expectations of how things are going to go, because those relationships are important and you don't want to light them on fire during this process, if at all possible. Then get the pre-inspection if you can, but either way, decide what you're going to do about any major flaws with the house. Are we going to sell it as is? Or are we going to fix them up and try to get more money for the house? Focus on transparency. Be very straightforward with your buyers. And also focus on the home's potential. Don't get caught up in all that's wrong. Tell them what's wrong, but tell them what's right. Tell them what's good, what's great. Why did your folks love living there? If you grew up there, what did you love about it when you lived there? And then be mindful, be ready for the emotional toll this is going to take on everybody involved. It looks like a real estate deal, but it is so much more. There's a lot more involved. As I mentioned throughout, there are tons of resources for you available on our homepage, talkingrealty.com. Just head there. There's links to everything that you could need. There's also a way to jump on my call schedule or email me. I'd be more than happy to help you. We have got so much experience helping people sell homes for parents or other loved ones, and I want to share that with as many people as possible. Certainly look for other episodes before this that deal with specific aspects of selling the home. You can also pick up my book. I'll link to that as well. That has my entire playbook contained in one 300-page opus. But don't worry, it's laid out very well, so you just go right to the section you need. Last thing is if you're listening, remember all of this is available on YouTube, so you can go there and check it out. And if you're watching, all of this is available on any podcast platform so that you can listen to me on the go. And with that, I'll let you get back to your day. Hey, thanks for sticking around today. Hopefully you learned something, maybe had a little fun. If so, please share this episode with somebody you know or on the socials. Feel free to tag me if you do. The Talking Realty podcast is brought to you by our friends at Associates Title and the Ohio Property Group, a family-owned brokerage serving all 88 counties with realtor services. By the way, if you have questions, if you have topics or guests you'd like to see on this podcast or here if you're listening, I'd love to hear from you. Just head over to talkingrealty.com and say hello. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, keep making smart moves in your real estate journey. For the Ohio Property Group, this is Glen Witten signing off. And remember, you can sell it. We can help.